Hi, I'm Joe Walensky, and I'm here bringing you another episode of our digital accessibility podcast, People Behind the Progress. And today I'm pleased to be joined by Kate Gonzalez. Hello, Kate. How are you today?
Hi, Joe. Great. I'm good. How are you?
It's a little bit of a rainy day in Bellingham, Washington, where I live, which is about 80 miles north of Seattle, Washington. Where are you located?
I am just outside of Chicago, and I think it's pretty similar. It's really gray. Sun's coming out a bit, but it's a rainy day here.
Well, it's great to have this opportunity to chat with you, and I'm really interested in learning your story. Probably the best place to start is if you could tell us a little bit about the nature of your work and what you're up to now.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So right now, I am accessibility director at Elevance Health, formerly and commonly known as Anthem. I am in the Belonging and Inclusive Experiences team, and my focus is really thinking about where do we have really great things happening in accessibility and disability inclusion, and how do we make those happen more widely? And where do we maybe have gaps, and how do we figure out how to fill those in and then make sure that that's happening widely? So it's a lot across the enterprise, and I focus quite a bit in HR, but that is expanding in some places. So it's a really ever changing and exciting space to be, where every day is different.
Well, where did things start out with you? What was some of your background that brought you to what you're doing today?
Yeah, really great question. I have a very wavy job history that has a really consistent through line. So I'll start at the beginning. I was an occupational therapist originally, very short lived in that career. I realized pretty quickly that clinical practice is not where my heart lies, but I really dug into and I loved working with a client when maybe their house wasn't supporting what they wanted to do or their community wasn't quite accessible in the way they needed it to do all the things they wanted to do. So I loved thinking, well, how do we address those issues within the home or the community so you can do everything you want to do? But I realized I didn't have the words for it at the time, but much more of a system thinker in terms of how do we make that happen on a big scale? How do we think about all the houses and everybody in that community? I thought I'd wanted to go to law school. I really liked the policy end of things. Took the LSAT, worked at a law firm for a few years, and realized that wasn't where I wanted to go. I love architecture and design, and I thought maybe that's my avenue. So I started taking calculus at night and drawing and took a really great studio class for a summer. And my studio instructor was like, "Yeah, I don't know that this is what you need to be doing either, probably based on my drawing skill." But I was able to then find a master's program that really spoke to me. It's disability and human development at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And this is a place where I just sort of had so many moments that clicked. I learned about the social model and the medical model of disability. I learned about disability rights movement and the history there. I learned about scaling these changes and how to make society a more accessible and inclusive place. So it really just made things click, and I realized this is where I've been heading. From there, I went on to intern at the mayor's office for people with disabilities in Chicago, and it was a really formative experience again to see how is a city thinking about accessibility and how do we make that happen again on this scale. And with some of those things that you have in place in a city and some of those constraints. So it was just a really good real life space. From there, I was able to pursue sort of that architecture passion that I have too. And I worked at an architecture firm here in Chicago that does a lot of consulting on accessibility and disability inclusion. And it was there that I kind of realized how this passion can come into action and honed those skills in sort of accessibility standards, but universal design and inclusive design and learning what that means on that scale. Um, Great experience, really incredible place. From there, I went on to video games and I worked at a company where I started to think about it as a whole and how we think about the games, but also the space where people work and the supports that are there. Um, Kind of thinking of it as a city, which is sort of going back to that city of Chicago piece. And then from there, I've come to Elevance Health, where I'm doing a similar space of kind of cohesive accessibility strategy across an enterprise.
Well, that is definitely, I think you used the term wavy. So, but that's what we find a lot of people have that are involved in the accessibility profession. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily a purely linear or foundational education activity. Certainly there's a lot to learn about accessibility. What were some of the things that you've done, over the course of your career to, specifically learn more about your accessibility activities?
That's a great question because I have had to do a lot of learning in order to get up to speed. I went into a lot of spaces not being a technical expert, right? I am not an architect. I am not a designer, but I was able to work with folks. I had incredible mentors. I really dug into the standards and learned what they meant. I've taken, as many webinars as I could just to learn where people are learning this and the most reputable places. Um, Doing it as you go, I think is really effective for me as a learner. You kind of throw me in and say, all right, figure out what we're going to do with this New York City hotel room. And we're able to kind of piece it together. When I moved into video games, that was a whole new world for me. I'm not a player. And I was able to attend really great sessions like um, there's a conference for game developers interested in accessibility. And it's just an extraordinarily welcoming environment where people want you to come in and learn. There's no gatekeeping. The more people who have this knowledge, the more people are doing it. And so I found that to be an environment where, it didn't matter that I'm not a game developer. I was able to come in and say, well, I know this piece of it and I know the application. And so as you're learning the specifics and the ways to do it in this industry in this space, I found a lot of really helpful folks along the way. And there's prepared material out there. I also have taken courses in UX and UXR in terms like focusing on accessibility and doing some of those more formalized courses. But a lot of it is sort of on the job and as you go, and with the generosity of others who have been there before.
Well, you're just talking about learning on the job, and you also gave us a little bit of a brief introduction to your work. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about what a week in the life is for you in terms of your activities?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to throw a couple things in that week that may not always happen at the same time, but I think it's relevant. Um, we've One thing I'd love to talk about is every month we have a meeting with our HR Accessibility Council, and I've found accessibility councils tend to be a great way of gathering some good stakeholder engagement. And so when we're having a meeting, it involves planning for that meeting, knowing what the topic is going to be, ensuring that everyone's available, sending out the agenda in advance, building those inclusive practices into what we're doing. So I'm going to be sending out that agenda, setting up with any guest presenters who we have, and prepping sort of a um, accessibility 101 section for each month's presentation. So that's going to be a common thing. And then we hold that session and I send out information afterwards. It's also going to involve a whole lot of meetings. I'm a natural introvert, so that can be kind of challenging, but I find that engaging people, mapping it out, but more than that, learning what everybody needs, what their goals are, how I can help them achieve their goals while they're helping me achieve mine. So I would say I have, probably 5 meet and greets a week or a follow-up here and there. So that's going to take a bit of my time. I'm learning from individuals across the organization, maybe within our disability-focused BRG, on something they've encountered and how we can maybe turn that into a system solution. I am helping to review policy and any changes to make sure that they're inclusive and, meeting our obligations, but also supporting our associates. I'm maybe doing a training with community managers who are out there at all of our offices to help them understand maybe you're not designing those spaces, but you can have a hand in making sure that they remain accessible and usable for people and being sort of a connection point for people to bring issues to your attention. So we're having a lot of great sessions like that. Again, like I said, every day is very different, but there's a lot of planning, setting something in motion, and then making sure that it continues on.
Well, it sounds like you definitely have enough to keep you busy. As you kind of look forward to the future, near term, longer term, are there any things happening that you're particularly excited about at work or possibly outside of work activities that you'd like to share with us?
I am excited about this is my second year at Elevance. And so I took my first year to say, let's learn the lay of the land. Let's find out who's out there, what's being done, and what needs to be done. You know, there are those immediate, urgent priorities that need to be taken care of now. And then there are those that roadmap. This is year two for me. And so we are at the point of activating on all of the information we gathered from last year. So I get so excited and energized to think about what does that look like? You know, we just hit our 1 year anniversary with the HR Accessibility Council, and everybody's kind of figured out what their space is in there and what they're involved and where they can really plug in. And this is the year to say, we're going to act on that now. So we've started a tracker and everybody has kind of a set of milestones to meet to engage their role in this organization. So I think it's starting to kind of make that spider web of this is not just my role because it's in my title. This really can be all of ours, and you can support this in your team. So I get excited about activation and things getting into the meat of it. I love strategizing. I think that's really a necessary and important piece. But now we get to take that strategy and turn it into action and into impact. And I think that's what really energizes me.
And I wanted to follow up on one thing you mentioned these different areas that you've been involved in your career. I was wondering if there are any things about accessibility that you find uh, different or than in accessibility activities you did before your current position. You know, some people
Mm.
find that uh, changing domains brings in a lot of changes. In other cases, it's still, some of the same principles. So I was just curious what your experience has been in that.
Yeah, I think there's everything is it's a little different, right? Like looking at the design of a cruise ship is really different than looking at a video game and then looking at HR policies. But there's these really consistent through lines in each, right? There's sort of universal truths in accessibility involving the community from the start. Nothing without us, right? Accessibility happening early and often, baking it in. There's these are just universal truths. But then you get into an industry and you think, well, from working in architecture, I learned that you never design to the maximum or the minimum, right? If I need 60 inches of space, don't put the room at 60 inches because if somebody comes in and adds tile, your whole thing is off, right? That applies in other spaces. From working in games, I learned that options are great, but there are also ways we can really seamlessly build in accessibility. From working with cities, I've learned a lot about needing to be creative to make programmatic access work. These things are all really specific to those domains, but they apply universally. So I can now think about don't do anything to the minimum or the maximum because we need to be able to build in space for things that may happen. The world is not a perfect place, right? That applies in many different spaces. Um, Options are great, but what about an integrated experience where everything is just accessible for everyone? That's the ideal, right? Um, Creativity and flexibility is something you use every single day in all of these spaces. So I think every kind of domain that I've been in has had its differences, but when it comes down to making things more accessible and inclusive, it's really a lot of the same principles, just brought through in different ways and needing to maintain that sort of curiosity and that, you know, making sure that we're advancing things in a concerted way and bringing leaders along for the ride, courage to make that happen, the ability to connect people to purpose. These things are kind of the same across the board.
Well, I appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with me about your background and how you came into the accessibility profession. And so I appreciate it, Kate, and look forward to maybe we'll meet in the real world sometime.
Yeah, I would love that. Thanks, Joe. This has been so great chatting with you. I really appreciate you welcoming me into the space. And the more accessibility folks we have in here, the better. So come
Yeah,
join us.
thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.